In this video, we'll learn how to add and subtract like fractions. If you're wondering what is a like fraction, you might want to watch my last video called Identifying Like and Unlike Fractions, or if you've learned math with a different vocabulary, you might know these as fractions with common denominators. Okay, so let's go ahead and start adding and subtracting like fractions. In the last video, we looked at these pairs of fractions and decided which ones were actually like fractions. We found out that the orange pair, 1/8 and 3/8, were like fractions because they both have the denominator 8. Okay, so we're going to add them. First, I want to point out that 1/8 plus 3/8 is the same thing as 3/8 plus 1/8. This is because of the commutative property of addition. With addition or with multiplication, we can move the numbers in the problem from first to second or second to first, and nothing happens to the product or to the sum. It's the exact same answer because of the commutative property. Now, with subtraction and division, that trick won't work. Subtraction and division, the numbers need to freeze in place for us to find the correct answer there. So now that we know we can move the numbers across, we need to think about what these quantities really mean. Well, we have 1/8 and 3/8, and we're trying to put them together. Because they are like fractions, we can treat this addition problem as if it were 1 apple and 3 apples. 1 apple and 3 apples doesn't just equal 4. For what? For spaceships, for hairs on my head. It equals 4 apples. So we're going to do the same thing, adding the numerators and keeping that denominator, that last name of the fraction, the same. So when we add 3/8 and 1/8, we get 3 apples and 1 apple gives us 4 apples. So 3/8 and 1/8 is going to give us 4/8. We can draw that quantity like this. I've taken a circle and divided it into 8 equal parts, more or less, okay? And we have 1/8 colored in blue and 3/8 colored in pink. When I put them both together, 4 of the total 8 parts are selected. So we have 4/8. But you might notice something else about this circle. If I cover up this part, and then I cover up this part, you'll see that those parts are equal. These 4/8 are actually exactly 1/2 of the circle. 4/8 equals 1/2, because 4 divided by 4 is 1, and 8 divided by 4 is 2, or because 4/8 of a circle is the same as 1/2 of a circle. Whichever way you want to think of it is just fine. Okay, so altogether we've come up with 1/8 plus 3/8 is the same thing as a half, because a half is the same thing as 4/8. This is how we add like fractions. We add the numerators and keep that denominator the same. At the end, we simplify if it's needed. Now let's work on subtracting like fractions. But remember what I said before. In subtraction, those numbers have to freeze in place. So we need to decide which fraction is going to be the minuend, or the first number in a subtraction problem, and which fraction is going to be our subtrahend, or the second fraction in a subtraction problem. To do that, we need to figure out which one is greater. Which one's greater, 1/8 or 3/8? Well, remember, because they are like fractions, we can compare them just like we would apples. How many apples is more, 1 apple or 3 apples? Well, 3 apples, of course. So if 8ths are actually the same quantity, we know that 3/8 is more than 1/8. So I've written that comparison here with our greater than sign. That means we're going to put 3/8 first in our subtraction problem. So imagine that I had 3/8 of something. Then I'm going to take away 1/8. What I'm left with are 2/8, okay? The same thing. As you'll notice, the numerators get subtracted and the denominator stays the same. We don't change it at all. Just like if we were subtracting 3 apples minus 1 apple. Our answer would be 2 apples, right? Not just 2 anything. So I've drawn this out on a bar model. We can see that the bar was split up into 8 equal pieces. I colored in 3 because that was the number we began with, 3/8. And I've crossed out one of those 8s. So now we can see just 2/8 are remaining. But if we look at the green lines, you can see how this bar with 8 pieces could actually be divided into 4 equal pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those equal pieces are fourths. If the whole bar equals a whole, we have 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. Okay, so 2/8 is actually the same thing as 1/4. This is true because 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 8 divided by 2 is 4. So just like when we add like fractions, when we subtract like fractions, we're going to manipulate those numerators using our operation. We're going to leave that denominator the same, and at the end, we're going to simplify the fraction if needed. Okay, I hope that this helps you find fraction sums and fraction differences when you are adding and subtracting like fractions.